Hello and welcome to Unwind Sessions, where right after my shift, I give the highlights of my workday and answer any questions that might have been asked the previous session. My name is Juan. I am an English, Spanish medical video remote interpreter with over 4 years of experience. Today is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021, and today I took a total of 32 calls. Today was a pretty interesting day. Not as boring as yesterday. There was a lot of things going on today. And there are three things that I would like to share with you today. The first one being a word that I already knew, but when I heard it the first time, I was a little bit confused. And the word, if you're from Puerto Rico, you probably know this. It's grama. And the Puerto Ricans called grass grama. And this was new for me, not today, but uh, some point, some point during uh, my profession, I came across this word, and the lady or the person used it, and I didn't understand it. So I had to clarify, and then the person told me that it was grass. And now every time that I hear somebody say grama, then I automatically know that this is what they're talking about, that they're talking about grass. And this is what they use in Puerto Rico for grass. Not all of them have told me this, but some of them have mentioned it like this. And whenever you hear a word from like a different culture, in this case, Puerto Rico, what I like to do is that whenever I hear words that are very specific to like a country or a region or a culture, I write it down and I remember it because believe me, you are going to hear that word again within this culture. So it's always good because as interpreters, you not only need to be uh, well knowledge um, in the language that you're working with, but you also have to know regionalisms and slang and things like that. Of course, you are not required to know them, but the more you do, the better and the easier and it'll be for you and the better flow that the call will have because you won't have to be asking to clarify those terms. So the term for today was grama, which is grass. 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 I'm sorry. Okay. And another thing that happened today, it was a very unique session. It was a provider that was giving, and I actually don't remember what the session was about, but the provider was speaking to the lady, and all of a sudden they would have a conversation, and they wouldn't even let me interpret. They wouldn't give me any time to interpret at all. The provider would ask something, then the lady would answer, then the provider would ask something again, and the LEP would answer. So they were just going back and forth. They were not giving me a moment to interpret. So when that was happening, of course, I just stayed quiet and I went along with the session because, like I stated before, I think that the best interpreters are the interpreters that you don't even notice that they are there. And that's what I try to do in every session, and it has got me into trouble once or twice. And I have been working hard to actually change what I do in those situations. But so far, I don't remember. And this time, something very unique happened because I actually got angry. As the lady was interpreting, it turns out that the LEP did not understand something, and she told the doctor, and then the doctor turned to me, and then she told me, "Interpreter, can you please repeat what was said?" And of course, after a conversation, I told her, "I'm sorry, ma'am. You guys are having a conversation. If you want me to interpret something, please give me a moment for me to be able to interpret and repeat what you said, and I will gladly interpret. But you're not giving me time to interpret." And the lady got mad. She got mad because she said I wasn't doing my job, and she actually had the audacity to tell me that I should interpret faster. She said, "It's because you're not doing your job. It's like you're sleeping. You should be interpreting faster." And that really made me angry because there was not a moment that I was able to interpret during that session. And since that happened, I told the provider. I told her, "Okay, you know what? How about we do the following? I'm going to interpret everything that you said, even if the other party is responding to you, and that way there won't be a problem." And the lady said yes, and I was okay with that, but I was pretty angry because, of course, I couldn't work because they were not giving me an opportunity to work. And the next thing that happened, we went back to the same thing. The lady, the provider gave her statement, and then the lady answered, and then they just went into a conversation back and forth. So there was no way for me to actually interpret, but I was pretty angry. So even though the lady interpreted and they were in the middle of their conversation, I actually went away and I interrupted what they were saying and I gave my interpretation. So we were all three of us just speaking at the same time. I know, not my best moment. That was my little petty revenge, and I was not proud of that. In hindsight, I think I should have gave priority to a good communication, and that's what we should always do. In hindsight, I should have probably reminded the provider that if they did not give me a moment to actually interpret, I was not going to interpret. But I mean, I was angry at that time and I wasn't thinking straight. And what I decided to do was just to talk over them and actually interpret. And the weird thing is that the provider was happy with that and she didn't say anything. And I did what she asked. So the provider would say something, and even though the lady would answer, I would still interpret what the provider said. And right now, like actually thinking about it, I think that was wrong, and I should have explained it better, and I should have handled the situation in a better way. But I mean, I don't know. For some reason, it just made me angry that this lady was calling me out on something that I didn't do, and that was pretty dumb of me. Uh, but that's what happened, and sometimes you're gonna come across situations that, for some reason, your feelings are gonna get in the way, and they're not gonna let you do the best job. But I mean, when things are done, they're done, right? And I'm not a person that actually goes back and thinks about it. I just say what's done is done. But if you actually think about it, if you actually think about the situation once you have calmed down and you think about a better way that you could have handled that situation, that is actually not a missed opportunity or lost time or a lost thought like I used to think. Now I think that that actually helps you to prepare in the future in case you actually come across a similar situation. So yeah, not my best moment, and I handled it very poorly. Hopefully in the future I can do a better job, and I don't think this has happened that many times. I've probably been angry at a provider or at a LEP a couple of times, and this was one of them. Not my proudest moments, but oh well. So at the end, everything went well, and the provider even actually thanked me for my good job. So that was pretty good. And the last thing I'm going to talk about today was that in a session, there were two ladies that were speaking to each other, the LEP and the lady that was there with her, her sister. And the provider would speak, and then I would interpret to the ladies, and they would just answer with an okay or a yes. There were not very um, not lengthy answers or anything that needed a lengthy explanation because they were just explaining some instructions to them. But when the ladies would speak to each other, I couldn't really understand them. And I thought they were speaking a dialect or something. And I mean, it wasn't getting in the way or anything, but I tried to understand them very hard and I couldn't. I don't know why. But what I would like to mention is that almost at the end of the session, the two sisters were speaking to each other, and believe it or not, they were speaking in Spanglish, and they would understand each other, and they would answer what each of them was being said. I couldn't understand it, but I kind of understood like some words because they would say it in English, and then they would switch to Spanish, and then a mix between a made-up word between English and Spanish that they made up, and it was so weird. And then it was the turn of the lady to give a lengthy explanation, and she gave me the explanation like that, like if she was talking to her sister in Spanish. So I kind of understood what she was trying to say, but then when she stopped talking, everything went silent, and then the provider looked to me, and I knew that she was hoping that I would interpret, but of course I don't interpret if I don't understand, and you shouldn't either. Don't interpret something if you don't understand the whole thing, because that will get you into trouble. So then, what I actually did was I told the provider, I said, "Ma'am, I am very sorry. Most of that statement was in English, I believe, and I was not able to understand the whole thing. But for me to actually give an accurate rendition, may I ask the lady to give me her answer in Spanish, please?" And yeah, I told the lady, and she did. She gave me the answer in Spanish, no problem. And I was able to interpret, and then the sisters were just speaking in their Spanish back and forth, and that was very weird. That's the first time that has ever happened to me. It's not the first time that someone has given an answer in English and the provider didn't understand, so they asked me to interpret. And I found it very weird and very comical that the patients like give their statements in English, and then you kind of understand them, and then the provider doesn't understand what they said, and then they hope that you can interpret what they said, even though they didn't understand it and they were trying their best in English. But anyway, it was just very weird. I only mentioned this because uh, that was some weird Spanglish, and I really couldn't understand it. Like I would make out the words that they said in English, but everything else it was just not understandable. So that was the highlights of my workday today. So let's move on to a question from one of our viewers from yesterday, and I am very sorry if I murder your name, but I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm pretty sure I can do your name, but not your last names. So this is Sumaya Abderrahman Agandor. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I promise you I was trying my best. And her question was, I just started an interpreting course and I am doing some assignments in regards to education, immigration, and health. Could you share more videos on how to prepare for these assignments in the topic of health, immigration, and education? Okay. So the first thing that I would actually do if I had to prepare my very first time for this sort of sessions is that I would actually just do a very quick Google search. I would put a common X vocabulary, where X is the topic that you're hoping to get the vocabulary from. And I actually went ahead and did that before the video. I put a common health vocabulary and common immigration vocabulary and common education vocabulary. And it actually went ahead and it gave me some lists. I probably picked the first or the second link when I did that search in Google, and they were pretty extensive lists, and they were pretty good in my opinion. Like as a um, just like a primer of this session. So of course there's gonna be tons and tons and tons of vocabulary, and you can't learn the whole thing. And another thing is that it doesn't matter how much you practice. Um, you really don't know what you're gonna get in a session. So you can practice so much, and then you could rock the session, or you could practice a lot and you could do badly in a session because you're not going to be able to cover all of the vocabulary that is actually used. And this is a profession where every day or almost every day you're going to see a new word and new vocabulary. So you're going to have to make lists and you're going to have to keep on studying all that vocabulary. So having said that, I once I publish the video, I'll make sure to put the links of what I found so that actually you can have them there. They look pretty good. So uh, once you have the vocabulary list, go. I would suggest that you go ahead and read it over it, and any words that are new to you or any words that you don't understand or you don't know the interpretation for, then go ahead and write them down or type them down, save them in a document, and that way you will actually have a new list of vocabulary to practice. Don't worry about the ones you already know, because if you already know them, well, you really don't need to study them, right? Because you already know them. And go ahead and make your list and practice that list. One thing that has helped me is if you actually know what the word is, like actually know the definition, and that actually helped me to remember a word much better. I don't know if it'll help you. I hope it does. And uh, once okay, let me move on to the next thing. Uh, what I once you already have your list of vocabulary that you are going to be practicing, the lists that you don't know, then I would suggest that you actually try everything. Try the best way for you to remember that vocabulary. For example, when I was first becoming a medical interpreter, what I did is that I just downloaded as much information on medical vocabulary as I could. There are forums, there are Facebook groups that will give you really good information, and just Google will help you with that. So once you actually have a list, you have to find out the best way to make those words stick. For example, you could have a list and then just have the word in English and then the word in Spanish, and just that'll be your list. And if you can do it like that, just studying what they are, just reading from the list, then that's good. You could actually also cover the Spanish section and then read the English and then try to remember the Spanish word and do it the other way. Cover the English and from the Spanish try to remember the English. Another thing that you can actually do is you can actually record a list randomly, maybe just in English or mixed English Spanish, or actually in the language that you're working with. I'm just gonna use English and Spanish because it's what I work with. But if you use another language, then go ahead and do it with your language. Um, so just record them and then play the recording. And when you hear the word, the new word, then see if you can actually remember it. And that is one way to actually do it. And another way that worked for me as well is that the words that I couldn't remember, I would just, like they did in school, I would just sit down and I would just write down like the word 10 times. And I would actually practice with my wife as well. She would have the list and she would tell me a word, and I would actually give her the Spanish equivalent or the English equivalent, the translation. And that's what I did. And when I didn't know the translation of a word, I would tell my wife to actually put a line on the word. And those are the words that I actually went to and I practiced 10 times. And that's how I actually did it. And I would believe that that is the best way to actually do it. And it does help to get as creative as you can. There's apps that you can input vocabulary into, and you could test your vocabulary that way to make it a little bit more interactive, a little bit more fun. But like preparing for assignments, I would say that vocabulary is key because that's what you're working with, right? So you actually have to have a mastery of that vocabulary that you are working with. So that is my suggestion. If you're going to prepare for a certain field, for a very specific field, then look up all the vocabulary that you can from the field. Make your list, practice your list, make your recording, make it as fun as possible, and write down the words or however works best for you. Just experiment. I mean, what works for me might not work for you, like I've already said. So this is a very personal question, and you're just going to have to try everything and figure out what works for you. Okay, and I hope that helps, and I hope that that answers your question. If not, you can always ask another question if you need me to explain something more in depth. Adding to that, though, I would like to add that when if there are words that you just cannot remember, or because I mean it's gonna be an extensive vocabulary, those words I suggest that you actually have your little cheat sheet. Like take to your assignments a sheet of paper with those with the list of vocabulary that you don't remember. Make it as small as possible so that you can be able to read it and make it be for you to be able to find the terms quickly. That way, if during a session you ever do happen to come up across one of those terms that you don't remember, you have your list and you know that it's on the list and you can actually look it up quickly and that will save your life. Um, and the cheat sheet will also help you to remember those words. I know that I had a cheat sheet when I was becoming a medical interpreter, and then I looked at a cheat sheet like 6 months later, and those were the hard words, the hard words that I just could not remember. And 6 months later, I already knew every single word on that list, so I was pretty proud of myself. And I learned the importance of making a cheat sheet, so that is going to be very important, and that is a definite lifesaver. And of course, whenever you visit that cheat sheet and you see that you know every word, that's just gonna give you a boost in your confidence and in your interpreting. Another thing that during a session, write down any new words and build a glossary. This is going to help you because many of the words that you're going to find online and on other resources are probably not going to cover the thing 100%, and there's going to be those words that you've never heard before. So make glossaries, make a list, and actually study them. When I used to work on a whiteboard, I would have my daily word out of my glossary. I would actually write on the very top of the blackboard, on the whiteboard, I'm sorry. I would actually put the word of the day, and I would constantly look at it when I was taking notes. So that really helped me in building up my vocabulary. And I believe that is it. That is pretty much all I had to say today. I hope I answered your question, like I said. So, in recap, look for common terminology, make a cheat sheet, make lists, look for the best way to that you can actually remember the vocabulary lists and the words. Make a cheat sheet. I've already said that, but it's not. Um, but it's very important. And write down the words, new words that come up in your session, and do a glossary and try to study those words. So that is pretty much it for me today. Please leave your questions in the comments and I will answer some of them on the next session. I will be here every Monday to Friday right after work. If I will not work on the next day, I will let you know beforehand. So that will be it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the video and have not done so for more content. And don't forget to share. Happy interpreting. Goodbye.